Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World. My name is Anna Kalczyńska. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and European leaders meet with US President Donald Trump in White House for critical talks on war with Russia. Trump has escalated pressure on Kyiv to cede land to Moscow. Zelenskyy, on his part, warned doing so would mean Ukraine loses key defensive positions and would be more vulnerable to Russian attacks in the future. Both leaders agreed, however, they had a very productive, a very good talk. As Donald Trump said, peace is attainable, and a bilateral meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin would be set in the near future. Joining me now to comment live from Tallinn is Louis Wierenga, Baltic Defense College. Good evening, sir. Thank you for waiting here with us and listening to this unprecedented meeting between Donald Trump and European leaders. Altogether, multilateral meeting.
Good evening, Anna. Great to be with you again.
So let me start by a quote. "I don't really think we need a ceasefire," said Donald Trump. "We can work a deal while they are fighting." That quote from US President Donald Trump after the meeting with Volodymyr Zelenskyy was heard by all the journalists in the Oval Office. So does it mean Donald Trump adopted Vladimir Putin's position?
Well, first of all, on that, less than around 12 hours ago, 1.5-year-old girl was killed in Kyiv by Russians. So that is not something that anybody who goes into a so-called peace agreement comes in good faith negotiating with. And so I think that that's just yet another tell on Mr. Putin's behalf about how he thinks of this. And I would say that after looking at the Alaska meeting, the one time where Mr. Putin was confronted by journalists where he actually kind of had a semblance of an answer, he appeared to mock by going, when asked if he would stop killing civilians. So it seems like it's just a joke to him, and it's in fact not a joke because it's very serious and lives are still being lost as this process goes on. So the one positive, if I can even say that, lining under this is that a lot of key European leaders were in Washington with President Zelenskyy to speak with President Trump to reinforce the idea that something needs to happen very quickly, because there is a little bit of positive semblance to the meeting that we saw last Friday in Alaska. So I think that there are some positive signs, but when you're negotiating with somebody like Mr. Putin, it's always in bad faith, and he will always continue to be architecting very egregious acts against the people of Ukraine. And President Trump says he wants to stop the killing. Well, now's the time to do that.
All right. But the mood in general today has been very good. All of the politicians, all of the leaders agreed that it's been a very constructive meeting. Both Volodymyr Zelenskyy, Donald Trump, the mood was perfect. But putting that aside, can this sort of a muddled position, not talking about ceasefire at all, could bring some positive results? Can it bring real breakthrough?
I think so, yes, because the U.S. Perm Rep to NATO was on the news very recently, and he said that NATO is as strong as it's ever been. This has made NATO come out stronger and more lethal. Those were his words. And he said that this is one of the reasons why Putin actually came to the table. So with somebody like Putin, you're going to need a little bit more, but that's one of the reasons why I think that he did agree to the meeting with Trump in Alaska. And Trump has said that he will consider calling a trilateral agreement between President Zelenskyy and Mr. Putin if the fighting continues, which it likely will. And then there's talk about the U.S. and definitely Europe and potentially the U.S. offering a Article 5 type of security protection to Ukraine. Envoy Witkoff called it a game changer, but then that is who's calling the shots here? Is it a game changer because the West says so or because Putin says so? So I think that there's a really positive outlook as we're seeing this unfold just now in Washington, waiting to hear the meeting between President Zelenskyy and President Trump in the Oval, and then President Trump and European leaders, and then the discussion that they have afterwards. And then there's inevitably going to be a call between President Trump and Putin after this, so that he can go back and say, these are what we've discussed, these are the points that we were going to discuss, and let's negotiate it further. And they said maybe, and this is a big maybe, as early as Friday, they can get this going. And again, it depends on how much the Trump administration is really willing to push this. I think that that's what it all comes down to.
Exactly. So the pressure has been shifted to Zelenskyy. But Zelenskyy once again reiterated that giving up Ukrainian territory is simply impossible. So where is the room for a potential compromise here?
Well, that's hard because, I mean, if you look at what Russia could potentially get, and again, this would be between President Trump and Putin, but what Russia could get is, if the U.S. pressures President Zelenskyy to seek control of Donetsk and Luhansk, if they pressure President Zelenskyy to freeze the lines in Kherson and Zaporizhzhia, the nuclear power plant, and if the U.S. recognizes Russia's hold over the land that they captured from Ukraine versus what Russia may be asked to concede, which is the sort of willingness to negotiate over small chunks of Ukraine and the openness to discuss security guarantees for Ukraine. And let's not forget that if Russia signs something, we can never take that in good faith. So they may say, we're going to sign that and not agree to it and come back in a couple of years' time. So this could be seen as a area for like a future staging area. So if Russia gains de facto control over part of Ukraine, it won't be recognized by the West, but it will be done so that they can say that we've got a stop to the war, we've ended the war. But I think that President Zelenskyy likely will negotiate for Zaporizhzhia, and to keep enough of part of the southern ports to be economically viable for the near future. And we shouldn't forget that Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that the president, meaning President Trump, feels like it is up to Ukraine and Ukraine alone who can decide what territory they're willing to give up, and if they're willing to give that up. And President Zelenskyy has said time and time again, they're not going to cede any territory. And the fact that we just witnessed European leaders in the room with President Trump backing up President Zelenskyy, I think is a great moment for NATO and a good moment for Ukraine, depending on how this is taken forward in the very, very near future.
So how about NATO membership for Ukraine? Is it out of the table for the time being?
Well, unfortunately, it looks like that is off the table. And I think we should remember that this was an important diplomatic step that was taken. And President Trump has been very, very firm that he wants to stop the war. And Mr. Putin has been very firm that he does not want Ukraine to join NATO. And if you look at his overall grand design, and I'm referring to Mr. Putin, it's a reorchestration of the European security architecture. Now, unfortunately, right now, Ukraine is not a NATO ally, but NATO allies are really not willing to let Mr. Putin reorchestrate their own security architecture. And that's something that I don't think that he will ever be able to change right now, given the current momentum. So I don't want to give some strategic foresight into the medium to long-term future, because during the 75th anniversary NATO summit, with a previous administration, U.S. administration, Ukraine was offered a bridge to membership, but that never really consolidated in a firm date or even a timeline. So I think that because Ukraine is firmly in the Western camp right now, we can't take that off the table, but I don't expect that to happen, unfortunately, in the near-term future, because any type of deal that the U.S. administration with allies would present to Mr. Putin, that would be a no-go, unfortunately. But if I could say silver lining out of this would be that there is talk of some type of security guarantee.
Exactly, some type. Let me elaborate on this one. NATO-style Article 5-like security guarantees for Ukraine. That's how it's been framed by President Donald Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff. So there were some discussions over land swaps involving Ukrainian regions. What do you make of these security guarantees, NATO-like?
Well, I think we have to be careful on a couple of points there. I mean, land swaps is not the term that I really like, because that would be basically giving up territory that Russia has unjustly and unlawfully attempted to take from Ukraine. And of course, the Ukrainian military has fought valiantly to prevent that from happening against all odds. But also, geopolitically, that's a big problem, because if this turns out to be a deal that's brokered without the, let's say, formal blessing of the Ukrainian president, and by that I mean going against what he would want to do, just to get things to stop for the short term, that would signal to other autocrats that it's okay to behave like this, because we have to bide our time, and then we can just act illegally and take land that we think that is ours, but it isn't ours. And secondly, it's also a big problem, because one of the things that may happen is that the current administration in the United States might persuade President Zelenskyy that this is the best deal he's ever going to get. And if you take it now, we will give you such and such. That's going to be hashed out after this conversation is over. But then that stops there. And what guarantees do the Ukrainian people really have that Russia is going to honor anything and not come back and double cross whatever deal is made and continue with aggression in the near future?
In this context, striking absence of an Eastern European representative at the table in the White House with US President Donald Trump. But that's a topic for a different discussion. Louis Wierenga, thank you so much. Lecturer of International Relations, Baltic Defense College from Tallinn, joined us this evening. Thank you so much, sir. And have a good day.
My pleasure, Anna. Great to be with you again. Have a good evening.
Thank you for watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Anna Kalczyńska, and see you soon.